Hi, I'm Rajendra. Welcome to Hacker Heap. In this video, we will look into the differences between class and object in object-oriented programming, and we will also look into how to create an object in Java and different ways to create an object in Java programming language. Before we start, please consider subscribing to the channel Hacker Heap.
So let's see the difference between class and object. A class is a template or set of instructions to build a specific type of object, and it determines how an object behaves and what the object contains. Whereas object represents real-life entities. Object determines the behavior of the class. It has a state, behavior, and identity. Object implements the state and behavior in the form of variables and methods and requires some memory allocated, whereas class doesn't need any memory allocated. So let's take this example. You want to build a car management system. You will define a car class which have a name, type, and color, and you will have the objects, the car, Accord, Tesla, and Camry, where these three are objects, and they define the car name as Accord and the type as a two-wheel drive and the color as blue. Whereas the Tesla object has a name Tesla and type four-wheel drive and color as white. So the object has a behavior and a state, and these are real-life entities, where the class is not a real-life entity. It's just a template or a set of instructions that specifies the object. So it specifies the car object and it specifies what the car needs to have. And these objects which are being created will define the behavior using those variables which are specified in the class. Now, we have looked into class and object. How do we create an object from a class? So you have to create three different objects for your car management system. So how do you create those objects? So we use constructor. So what is a constructor? Constructors are used to initialize the object state. Like the methods in Java, a constructor will also contain statements. The default constructor is provided by Java. You don't have to initialize any default constructor. Java provides automatically if you don't have a default constructor. Let's go ahead and create a class and create those objects using constructor and see how that works. I have my Eclipse open. I'll go ahead and create a new Java project. Given the name sample Java project, I'll just finish it. I'm creating a sample Java project class. This would be my main class. Once I add this class, I will define the main method like we have seen in the previous video. And I would just print a hello world. So let's run this. There you go, it printed hello world here. Our intention is to create the class, the car merchandising class, and create those objects. So let's go ahead and create a car class. Car. So I will define three different variables as private name, which is the name of the car, string name, private string type, private string color. Let's go ahead and create a getters and setters for this. We have the getters and setters for name, type, and color. Now we have the class color. We want to create the objects Accord, Camry, and Tesla like we looked earlier. So let's go ahead to our main class and we can create those objects here. How do we create those objects? We create the objects by calling the class constructor. That means the car class constructor. Have you seen any constructors here? No. By default, Java will have a default constructor even if you didn't mention anything. something like this: public car. That's it. This is the default constructor. So you don't have to define the default constructor until and unless you are overriding that constructor. We will look into that in a bit. So for us to create the car object of type Accord or Tesla or Camry, we need to create the objects using the car class constructor. So let's do it. Car Accord is equal to new car. So car Tesla equal to new car. Car Camry equal to new car. So we have created 3 different objects. So we can define the type and all using the getters and setters we have. Accord dot set color to blue. We will name it as Accord. Set type to two-wheel drive. So we have defined the color, name and type of the Accord object. We will do the same thing for Tesla and Camry. So we have created similar kind of objects for Tesla, and we added all the characteristics of the Tesla, and we did the same thing for Camry. So let's see like how they will be printed if we directly printed the objects. I'll just directly print Accord object and see how it will print. Similarly, the Tesla and Camry objects. I'm running it as a Java application. So we can't print the objects directly. So we need to convert them to strings. For that, what we can do is we can go ahead here and generate the toString method, which will do that for us. There you go. Generate toString. So it will generate the string with all these 3 variables. Let's generate it. So what it's doing is it returns a string car of type name. It will show all the variables in it. So now let's go back and do the toString here. And let's run it. There you go. You can see this. The Accord car has the name Accord, type two-wheel drive and color blue, and Tesla has two-wheel drive and white, and Camry has two-wheel drive and red. So we created 3 objects called Accord, Tesla and Camry using car class. For that, we used the car class constructor. It's very annoying to set these values every time, like once we created the objects. Let's say if we have like more than 3 variables, the code looks a little clumsy. So what we can do for that is we can create a constructor, overload a constructor. That means I can go ahead and create a constructor car, which takes 3 parameters: name, type and color. And what it can do is like it can assign here, we can assign here name. So now we created this constructor here. If we ever overrided a constructor, we need to define a default constructor, because somebody might be calling the default constructor and it will throw an error because we already overloaded it. So let's define a default constructor. Just call the super. Yep. So I had a default constructor which you don't have to define until and unless you overloaded it. Here in this case, we overloaded the constructor. So don't worry about overloading. We will explain that in the later videos, but this is how you do it. Let's go back to our main class and change the code there. And here I will remove all this, and what I do is I will pass the parameters here. The name, the type, and the color. And one more thing, we need to pass these parameters in order because we are accepting name as the first parameter, type as the second parameter, and color as the third parameter. So it should be in order here. Let's do the same thing for Tesla. I'll make it 4-wheel drive, white color, and Camry, and red color. So see how clean the code looks now. So what we did here is we've overloaded the constructor and passed the parameters while creating the object itself. So in the earlier case, we are creating an empty object and assigning values to that. But in this case, we are passing the values so that when the object is returned, it has all those values. So let's run it and see if it actually prints the values. It gave the similar output like the earlier one, but in this case we removed all those clumsy code. So now we have created the object using constructor, but let's look into different ways of creating the object. There are multiple ways to create an object. There are different ways to create an object. So let's see a couple of different ways to create an object. So the different ways to create an object are using new keyword like we did now, and you can use a new instance keyword, and using clone, and using class loader. We will look into each one of them now. Let's go back to Eclipse. Now I'm back in my Eclipse. So let's create a new object called Tesla2 using a new instance variable. We need to extract the car class before creating the instance of type Tesla2. So how we do it is like we create a class, we define a class object where you get class of type car. So the reason I'm giving the full path is class.forName takes the whole path. If you just give the name car, it will throw an error saying class not found. So you have to define the package as well. Now what we need to do is we need to create an object of type car using new instance. Tesla2 is equal to class dot new instance, and we need to cache that object back to car. So now this shows that it asks us to keep in a try catch, because if it couldn't find the class of type car, it will throw an exception saying class not found. So we need to surround it with try catch. We will look into deeper in the exception handling part about try catch. To print the stack trace, the function we need to call is print stack trace. So now I have this class Tesla2. Now let's define the values for Tesla2 car. I'll set the color to gray. Tesla doesn't have gray color cars. 2 dot set name model 3, set type of all-wheel drive. Let's try to print it out here. Let's run it. There you go. The Tesla2 object has been printed out. So this is one way of doing it. If I hover over here, this new instance method has been deprecated since Java version 9. So it's no longer available, and you can use it, but it's deprecated, so no need of it. So most of the time you never use this new instance function. Most of the time you will be using a new, or if you are using a framework, you will be using auto wiring to create the objects. So let's look into the third type using clone. How do we do that? So the third type, you can create an object of object1 by using new keyword like we used earlier. And what you can do is you can create object2 by cloning object 1. So if you hover over here, it's saying the method clone from type object is not visible. What's happening is, by default, Java will hide the clone object. So what we need to do is, we need to go back to car and you should be able to add this object clone, override the clone function so that it returns the super clone object. Now, if you go back here, now it says to add try catch. Like earlier, it will throw an exception if something is wrong. So we need to surround it with try catch. Likewise, I will print the stack trace. Now we will do the same thing for object 2. And the name as clone car. It's a no-wheel drive. Now let me print that out. So let's go ahead and run it. So it still says the class cannot be clonable. Let's go back and see what we did wrong. So we had this overridden function. Oh, we need to do like implements the clonable. So we need to implement the clonable interface. Okay. Now go back here and try to run it again. There you go. We got the clone car with name clone car, type no wheel drive, and color purple. So we have seen how to create an object using the new instance, which is deprecated. We have seen how to create using cloning of existing object, and we also have seen how to create an object using new keyword. Let's look into other one using the class loader. So we will create a new car object called class loader object. Let's keep it as null for now. And the way we create a class loader object is, we will use the existing class and load the car class and create the object. So we have the class loader object car is equal to new, our main class sample Java project, constructor dot get class dot get class loader dot, we need to load class of the class name car dot new instance. Again, it's the same thing. We need to add a cast to the car, so we will add the car class here to cast it to car object. Now we'll have a try catch. So we'll do the similar things. We will go ahead and print out the class loader object. I will name it as many wheel drive. So let's go ahead and run this. Wow. It says the class not found exception for car. The reason is we need to define the whole package like we did earlier. Let's run it. There you go. We got the class loader class as well. So we have looked into 4 different types of creating an object using the new keyword, using the new instance, which is deprecated, using object cloning, and using the class loader. So you might generally use new keyword all the time, most of the time at least. These are the different ways to create an object.